the first thing we're going to start with is something that has nothing to do with fly tying. At least you probably are thinking that. As ladies, you probably have this around. You use it for taking static electricity out of clothing. It's available in your local supermarket in the laundry detergent aisle. Well, we use it to take static electricity out of our supplies, and it's especially important when we tie with animal hair, like deer, elk, moose, etc. So I just sprayed a little bit around, got it on me, and now we're going to be looking at the materials. Well, it's laying, because this is laying on top, I'll just hold it up, and all this is a package of tailing feathers that we got from Whiting Farms. If you don't have that, just use some hackle fibers out of the large feathers on a cape. We're going to be using large feathers out of a Whiting hen cape. This is the hen cape right here, and actually I accidentally broke off the very tip of that cape, as you can see here, and these are the feathers that we're going to be using for wings. You can say, wow, how are you going to make wings out of that? Well, we'll show you here in a minute. I'll just put that back in the package and get it out of my way. Here's the two feathers that I've already selected for tonight, and I've cut off the base of the feather so I can get rid of all the fuzz, and just placed them in a little baby clothespin to have them all lined up for me here. You'll see what I mean here in a minute. I'll set that over by the vise. We're going to be using gray thread. I'll just set that over there. By the way, if you're wondering what the size is, the gray thread is size 6/0 and or 70 denier, in case you follow that. I have double magic dubbing in a package, and I also have 3 hackle fibers, and I'll grab my tail material. I'll just set that all over by the vise, and Gretchen will move us over there so we can get to work. Okay. Now what you're looking at is not the fly we're tying tonight. That's one of the things that if you spend any time in our Zoom clinics, you'll soon know that that's a focus fly. And it's the fly that we use to make sure that everything's in focus before we start tying. And that looks like it's pretty good focus. When we can see the fibers in the thread that goes on the head, we're good to go. And we also have a couple of stray dubbing fibers there, and that shows up. So we're in good shape. I'll just take that and set it aside. I want you to notice that I have that, though, held in a easy clip, which is just a clip you can get at Radio Shack or something similar. It's an electronic test clip. All that is for, it sure is a lot easier to pick it up. And I don't have a whole lot of those, but I've got hundreds and hundreds of hackle pliers. And I want you to notice that that's how I did my hooks. In fact, I've got 5 or 6 of them down there just in case I need them tonight. And this is how I have them held. The point is buried inside of the clips, and it's holding it there so that it's really easy to pick it up like that. I can just set it right in the vise, anchor it in place, take off that hackle pliers, and I'll set that aside. And the reason I bury the hook inside is when you're live on the internet or anywhere, the last thing you need to do is try to pick up a hook and jam it into your finger. And so covering up the hook point sometimes saves me an on-the-job injury. Okay, now let me just get this all set straight. There we are. Now we're going to start out with our thread. Gretchen and I use the thread to mark parts of the body. And one of the parts of the body is where the wings will be placed, how long the tail is, how big the tail is, and all that type of stuff. And we always start our tying thread at that division point between body and wing. And right there is where I want the wing to be. Whoops, I just bumped that thread with, and then I'll cross over. So I'm just putting on a thread base. We always put a thread base under all materials except one, and that is hackle fiber tails. We never do it with a hackle fiber tail. And why is that? Because invariably you end up wrapping back too far, and if it gets towards the end here, your thread will slip down over the back of the hook, and it'll kick the tail down and make it point downhill, and we don't want that. So we're just going to start there, and we'll actually be binding the fibers for the tail to the bare hook shank. Now I'll just get my feather here for the tail. And as you can see that I got some pretty long fibers here. And one of the things that gets people into a lot of trouble is when they strip the fibers off of the feather, they try to pull the fibers away from the feather. Well, I'm going to grab those fibers with my left hand and pull the feather away with my right. If I do it the other way, about 80% of the time, you'll misalign the fibers. But right now, I'll measure that for length. A little bit longer than the shank is what I would like. And then I'll just start binding it to the top of the hook. Now I have a nice straight tail, right? Well, it's really easy if you have a thread base under, like I mentioned earlier, for you to get to the end, and that last turn will slip off of that thread base and tilt your tail down. Sometimes you don't notice that until the fly is done, and then it's too late to fix it. But anyway, we'll just move back forward here, trim off the waist. And we've got our tail in place. Now, is that in the right place? Well, the thing I like to do is check where my wing is going to be, because especially when I have a camera setting between you and me, sometimes I'm looking at, well, what I'm looking at is up on the screen to see if I can see where I'm at, because I have a large TV off to the side so that I can kind of watch what I'm doing, but I can't really see what I'm doing on the hook because I got a camera lens in my way. So what I do is I use a hook that is 2 sizes smaller, and I use the gap of that hook, and I come from behind the hook eye back to the thread, and when it's equal to that gap, that's the placement that I want for the wing. And so I want to make sure my thread is hanging there. Now, you remember those 2 big feathers? Well, there they are. And you notice that I broke off the butt ends of them, and then I faced the 2 so they were opposing each other. The natural curve is away from each other. Okay, that's how we're going to do our Wonder Wing. So I'm just going to grab that clothespin and get it out of the way. And we're going to actually stroke the fibers back, and the stroke back fibers become the wing. Well, before we go any further, you might be asking yourself, well, how many fibers go in a wing? Well, it's in direct relation to the length of the hook shank. And what I like to do is take the stem on the fibers that swept back, hold it up, and I want a piece of stem with fiber swept back that is about half the length of the hook shank, no more than 2/3. Okay, you can see I'm at the ragged edge or too far, so I'm going to get rid of some of those fibers. I'll sweep them all back. Excuse me. And let me get my bodkin.
Hey, Al, I know a few of our members are tying along with you.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay, good. I should slow down a bit.
I'm sorry I didn't say that. And if they want to speak up, ask questions, or say slow down or something, please go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. If you've got them all unmuted, please ask your questions as you need. And I'll slow down. I thought I was doing a presentation, and if you're tying along, I'll slow down and we'll give you a chance to get caught up.
Because I know Patty is, and I'm not sure who else. I think Helena, are you? And
Patty,
Becky?
you've already tied this one before, so you're cheating.
I didn't do very well. That's why I'm doing it again.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, all right. That must mean I'm a pretty bad teacher, huh?
No.
Anyway, the length of stem should be half the length of the hook shank, no more than 2/3, but you don't want to go too much less than half. And you want to divide those so they're even on the top and the bottom. And I need to take my bodkin and just do an even division so they're even on the top and the bottom. And I'm having trouble seeing it. You know what I forgot to do, Gretchen? The same thing you did the other night. I forgot to put on my other glasses. Let me get them on so I can see what's going on here. I recently got a operation on my eyes, and I can see street signs again and drive, and everything is wonderful, except now it takes 4 pair of glasses to tie flies. Anyway, so you notice that I have now got that, so it's about just a little bit more than half the length of the hook shank. And those are the fibers that are going to be swept back. So I'm going to sweep those fibers back, and I want to wing this as long as the hook shank. Well, that means that what I'm going to end up with is a looped Wonder Wing. And that's going to give me a wing that has lots of flexibility and won't twist my leader when I'm casting. The actual original Wonder Wing, as it was developed in Europe, they actually tied the stem and the fibers down, and it makes a really good looking wing. But it's a little bit too stiff, and it really twists up your leader, especially if you're doing stiff wing flies on lightweight leaders. Anyways, to tie this on to that length, though, if I try to hold that out there like that, my thread, as it tightens around that wing, it's going to twist fibers over each other, and they're going to end up a mess. So what I'm going to do is temporarily tie this on very short, stem, fibers, all in one, with 3 snug but not tight turns. Notice that the feather kind of turned on its side. Don't worry, it'll straighten out here in a minute. I'm going to pull towards the right side of the screen with my right hand, pulling that wing out to the length that I want it to be.
Notice how he uses, notice how he thumb against the eye of the hook. Notice how he uses his finger against the eye of the hook to steady his hand.
Yeah,
Like that really is helpful.
I've been drinking coffee all day, and I got the shakes bad enough that I could just yank that whole thing out of there. I might do it anyway, who knows? But what I want you to notice is that it starts to straighten up as soon as it comes out from under. And why is that? It's because the shape of the fibers coming off of the stem itself, they're slightly oval on the sides and more flat on the other sides, the sides that are facing each other. And so they just kind of pull right in line. Now I want that to be equal to the length of the shank. And let me just get one of the hooks that I had, make sure that it's equal to the length of the shank. I'll just go ahead and bind that in place now. And
Is everybody caught up?
I'm going to use my hook from the size 14 to verify that my wing hasn't jumped around on me. Well, it looks to me like it's in about the right place. I'm going to wrap back on the waist end of that wing I just tied on and pull up those waist fibers. And notice how I'm laying my scissors flat along the shank from the off side of the hook. That gives me a real steep cut to those fibers. And it gives me a really nice taper to blend the wing fibers into the waist from the tail. Now I'm going to wrap over that, bind it all together, make a nice smooth underbody, bring my thread back up to the back of the wings and stop and let you all catch up. All my pulling around and everything, I've taken one of those tail fibers and messed it up a little bit, so I'll straighten that out. Nope, I won't. It doesn't look like it wants to, and that's why God gives you scissors.
Is Helen tying?
I can't tell from here. I got the wrong glasses on to tell. Well, anyway, you can see a pretty nice looking wing starting to shape there. And I'll hold on until Liz or somebody there on your end kind of gives me a heads up that it's okay to get started again.
Does anybody need them to wait for you?
Okay, Helen is tying. Okay, Helen says go.
Okay, good. Well, now we're going to wrap a thread dam in front of those wings to force them to stand up. And I'll just leave the thread hanging there for the moment. So now we have our wings standing up. Notice we still have the waist left over and we haven't divided them yet, but I'll let you all get your thread dam in there and then we'll go ahead and continue.
I think she's ready.
Looks like it. Okay. Well, what I'm going to do now is take these 2 feathers and pull them apart like that. What I'm going to do now is take and pull this back. See if you can see what I'm doing. Trim off the waist, and there's the wings that pop right up there. Now, before you lay these feathers, the waist feathers down, they're not waste, they're future flies. Put them in the clothespin, and so the trimmed ends are waiting to go on the next hook. Now, I want you to notice that we have a pretty nice division, but I like my wings to be divided just a tiny bit more. So I am going to crisscross between those wings. So that I get a little bit better division. All right. Thank you. Okay, well, we're getting ready to put on our dubbing. And I just got to bundle that dubbing out. And that's a Double Magic gray dubbing. And it's got Antron highlights. And I'm just going to add some Antron highlights instead of the muskrat belly fur that we were going to use before, just so you could kind of see something a little different. We're going to use the wax that Gretchen makes right here in our own home, BT's dubbing wax. We sell it all over the world. We just recently sent a large order of it to England. We've got customers in France that cover most of the other part of the world. And then, what was it, last week? We sent a bunch to Colorado to a fly shop. So we sell it everywhere. It's a real sticky kind of stuff. And I want to show you something about the wax. I want you to notice that I don't have the wax cranked way up above the lip of the tube. If you crank it way up, you're going to end up slicing the wax with your thread. And maybe that fly will come out okay. But by the time you do that on 3 or 4 more flies, you're going to have big lumps of wax coming off on your thread, and it's really frustrating. The other thing I want you to notice, I'm still holding the cap in my hand. I'm flipping it over, so it's going to be setting up, so that we'll tell you why here in just a little bit. But I set that back now out of my way, and I'm going to put the dubbing wax on the thread. Now, I usually do it like this, right here, and I got a camera between you and me, which makes it kind of difficult. So I've learned since starting these Zoom classes to do it on the other side. Just get the wax, the thread as sticky as you can. Now remember, if I set this down, I guarantee it before the night's over, I'll knock that open tube of wax into the trash bin, and it will be a mess that takes forever to clean up. Remember that cap that I set down facing up? I'm going to turn this over and shove it right into there right now so we don't have any accidents, and it's there waiting for me next time. Let me pick up
Al, I have a dumb question.
Yeah,
What is the purpose of this wax?
I'm sorry, what?
What is the purpose of this wax?
The wax is to make the thread very sticky so we can do the next thing that we were just getting ready to do.
Got it.
We've got a bundle of dubbing, and we've got sticky thread, and we're going to apply the dubbing to the thread by touching it. It's called touch dubbing. I don't know, whoever dreamed that name up sure was working hard for the name, but anyway, there it is. I got a little too much right there, and I want you to notice I have a good distribution of dubbing all the way along that thread. So I'll go ahead now and twist that in place and get ready to wrap my body. And I'll just start at the back of the hook. However, I could start just about anywhere. And I want you to notice that I'm using the rotating feature of my vise to look at the other side of the hook. How many times have you tied a fly, you hold it up and you say, Al, you did a good job on that. That looks good. And you look at the other side and you missed a spot. Darn. Well, when you put the dubbing on the way I'm doing it right now, we're not going to be missing any spots. Okay. Now I'm going to get a feather. I knocked that thing must have knocked it into the waste bin, but I got another. Okay. And I've already stripped one end of this feather so that I can just go ahead and tie it on. And I want you to notice that I'm tying it on with my dubbed thread. And that's because I personally like dubbing under my hackle. That's not anything that you have to do. In fact, I don't recommend it. I'm just saying I like that. That's why I do it. But it doesn't mean that you have to do it. Now I'm going to start wrapping my hackle, making my first turn at the back. And I'm going to make a couple more at the back. And I'll make one in the front, making sure it's good and tight against the front of the wing. And then I'll advance forward. Until I get up almost to the hook eye. I'll pull that up and tie that off with 2 turns of thread. I'll stop right there and let everyone catch up.
Okay, looks like she's.
Okay. Now I'm going to do something you're going to probably think I'm crazy, but I really have a purpose in mind. Whoops, that fly got away from me and it came undone. And now the hackle is becoming unwrapped. In fact, it's becoming unwrapped so much so that I've got to help it do that. Well, okay, let's just set that aside. We're going to talk to you a little bit about the rotating feature of your vise. First, let me get my handy dandy half hitch tool. I'll just place a half hitch at the front because I don't want my thread to come off. We're going to talk about applying hackle using the rotary feature of your vise. Now, I see an awful lot of people get up to this point in their tying and they bring their bobbin rest in. And they end up using it as a thread rest, not a bobbin rest. They pull it clear out, rest it over there in the front. And as you can see now, I can go ahead and rotate and put on my hackle if I want to, or whatever I want to do. And then when I'm done with that, I said, oh, okay, let me get the rest out of the way. I do, push it out of the way, and oh, the thread's too long now. Now I got to take and grab the spool and twist it up so I can get it back to where I can do my job of tying again, getting it back to working length. Let me show you a trick. We're going to show you a trick on the bobbin rest because it really is a bobbin rest, but too many people use it as a thread rest. Now what I'm going to do is I like my thread to be at a working length of about 1 inch, just like I have right there. You can see that it works good for me. Maybe you like a longer or shorter one, that's up to you. But what I'm going to do now is I am going to drop my bobbin rest just a short distance. You can kind of see it off on the lower right hand side of the screen. I'm going to take my bobbin now and rest it on the rest itself. And I want you to notice where the thread falls. Right in line, and I did not lose my working length of thread. That's pretty cool. So now I'm going to use the rotating feature of my vise to apply hackle. And I'll keep working my way forward until I get to the front of the vise. And now instead of tying it off like you normally do, it's called the drop tie off, I am going to rotate the vise 2 more times and tie off the feather. And so there, it's all tied off. Now I need to put that's the second turn. I missed one. I've already done a pretty good job of anchoring it here. I'll show you with my pointer that I'm pointing right in there with the pointer. It's anchored like that pretty well. What I am going to do now is pull the feather back and wrap thread in pointing in this direction. So I build a thread head and a jam knot that places a dog leg in the stem of the feather, and it won't pull out, but yet I have a nice small head. Now here I'm just wrapping that thread head in place. In fact, you'll probably be able to see that thread head a little bit better than you could with the gray than you can with the black. And I want you to notice how it's taken that feather that was sticking forward like this before. Let me move. That it was angled forward like this, and now it's angled back because we placed that dog leg in the stem. Now I got a little bit of my mess up right there. I got to cover that up because I do not want any bad looking heads here on Al's flies. So I'm going to go ahead now and place my whip finish.
Good whip finish.
Oh yeah, good whip finishes and bad whip finishes. Well, the good ones, and I'm going to do this one over. It's going to make too big of a head, but that's all right. A good whip does not start at the hook eye and go back. It starts back at the back of the head and has each turn advance forward towards the hook eye. Now, why is that good and the other way is bad? Well, go to our YouTube channel, type LBD whip finish, and it will show you how to show you why it's a good whip or a bad whip. Now let's trim off this feather. And, you know, again, people would think, oh boy, I want to cut that close because I don't want it to show. Well, we're going to cut it long. It just hides back there in the hackle. You don't see it. It's just doing its job. And I have one little spot. All right, let me reach over here just very carefully and try not to hit the camera so that I can get my felt tip marker, because here's another trick that I would hate to show you, but I'm going to anyway. So you've got a good looking head and you've got one fiber of sticking through that you don't want it to show. Well, color it black.
Got a thing sticking out too.
Yeah, it's from there.
There you go.
Yeah, it was sticking out from back in the hackle. I shoved it back. Anyway, I'll set that aside. Okay, great. I got somebody that knows how to restring my bobbins for me when I cut the thread. Thank you, Gretch.